Hey, Stage Warriors. This is Don McGrath, co-founder of Speakers Pathway Coalition. And maybe about a month or two ago, I made a video. I love analyzing talks. That's kind of my jam. That's what I do. And not just for the members of Speakers Pathway, but I just love it in general. And I've been coach at some TED events and TEDx events. And so I really love just analyzing talks. And so maybe a couple of months ago, I analyzed Simon Sinek's TEDx talk, which is actually on TED.com. It's actually, I think, the third most viewed TED talk of all time with over 42 million views. And it's about how great leaders lead with why. And so I did an analysis of it. I just kind of went through it, provided some thoughts, some insights on kind of what I thought of the talk itself, why it worked, maybe some things that Simon maybe could have even enhanced. And so I really just kind of breaking down the flow of the talk, breaking down what I felt really, really worked for it, why it worked. And so I thought I'd do this and people loved it. People absolutely loved it. So I thought, heck, people liked it. Why don't I do it for the top TED Talk of all time, which is by Sir Ken Robinson. And it's the title of the talk is Do Schools Kill Creativity? Talk about a punch in the mouth for a title, right? So he's an educator. And this TED Talk has over 52 million views. I don't know where it is today, but it has a lot of views. And I took a course on comedy maybe a year or two ago, and it said that this top TED Talk, which is this talk, has more laughs per minute than the funniest Seinfeld episode. So, I got very, very curious. I haven't counted them, so I don't really know that for a fact, but I assume it's a fact. Hey, AT, thanks for joining. So the top TED Talk of all time, more laughs per minute than the funniest Seinfeld episode. So I believe that's really a big part of the reason this talk really works and why it has over 52 million views on TED.com. So, Sir Ken Robinson, he's kind of an unassuming guy. He even has a little bit of a limp. He's not one of these dynamic speakers. He uses some hand gestures. He uses no slides in this thing, not a single slide. Okay, so he broke a lot of what we normally would think of would be, a really captivating talk. And I just wanted to kind of walk through the things that so I'm a big fan of analyzing things in language, analyzing things in scripts. So I've actually printed out the script. Did you know on TED.com, you can actually print out the transcript of every single TED Talk on TED.com? You can do it. Just Google it. You'll figure out how to do it. It's very, very easy. So I did that for his. And so let me kind of tell you what my thoughts are. So Sir Ken Robinson comes out on stage, very unassuming. He's got a British accent. I think he's a professor and across the pond. And he comes up, good morning, how are you? So he does things that I wouldn't do. In fact, when I coach people, I say, if you have a short talk like this, less than 30 minutes, you really have to just get people's attention very quickly. So instead, he kind of comes out, hey, it's been really fun, hasn't it? It's been really great, hasn't it? He says, I've been blown away by the whole thing. But then he does what's really brilliant. Here's why this whole thing works. Next thing he says is, in fact, I'm leaving. So boom, like within his first line, he totally gets us with his dry British humor. And so that just kind of gets you. It smacks you right in the face with humor. Okay, in fact, it's so good, I'm leaving. And he starts talking a little bit about education. He's an educator. And so he really loves it. And he starts talking about educators in general. And he says, if you're at a dinner party and you say you work in education, well, actually, if you're an educator, you're probably not invited to a dinner party. And he said, if you work in education, you're probably not even asked. And if you someone does happen to ask you that, and you tell them, you see their eyes roll back in their head, and they think, oh my God, why me? So he just humor. And I can't do it justice. I can't do the execution of this justice. So you really have to go on TED.com, watch this talk. You'll see the brilliance. He's like a stand-up comic. His timing is absolutely impeccable, and people are laughing like crazy. You can kind of even see in here. It says laughter, 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 laughter. this is the big reason why this talk really works. And he goes on to do more of the humor. He says, but if you ask someone about their education, they basically pin you to the wall and start talking about their education. But then he gets to the point, and he says that, you know, if you think about it, children starting this year in school are going to be retiring in 2065. And he says, you know, we have no clue how to educate these people who are going to be retiring in 2065. There's just no freaking clue. And despite all the experts that are there, Ted, he calls people out. He says, despite all us experts being here, we have no flipping clue how to educate them. And we have no idea. And he says, I think this is extraordinary. So that's when he really brings up the point, which is we have no clue about what the new generations are going to require in terms of education. In fact, he's going to go on and tell us how what we're doing is all wrong and why it's all wrong. And he goes and he says very explicitly, so here's the problem statement. And my contention is all kids have tremendous talents, and we squander them pretty ruthlessly. Think about that language. Think about that language. We squander them ruthlessly. Our children's creativity. Doesn't that just hit you? Doesn't that just hit you? So he hits us with humor, he softens us up, and then he hits us with a very, very powerful statement. He goes on to say, my contention is that creativity now is as important in education as literacy, and we should treat it with the same status. So boom, now he's leaning into it. Now he's saying, I'm going to make a stance here and say that what we're doing is wrong, and I'm going to tell you how. And then he comes right with the humor again. He says, all the kinds of applause happens, right? And then he says, well, that was it, by the way. Thank you very much. So 15 minutes left, huh? Well, I was born and people are laughing. He laughter. He goes, so he pretends like he's done. And that is absolutely brilliant. So then the laughter subsides. And well, what does he do? He tells the story about a child that demonstrates that kind of leads to his point, okay? And I'll read the story because it's so good. I just have to read it because I can't do it justice. I heard a great story recently. I love telling it, of a little girl who was in a drawing lesson. She was 6, and she sat at the back drawing. And the teacher said this girl hardly ever paid attention, and in this drawing lesson, she did. The teacher was fascinated. So she went over to her, and she said, what are you drawing? And the girl said, I'm drawing a picture of God. And the teacher said, but nobody knows what God looks like. And the little girl said, they will in a minute. I love that story. So again, with the humor and obviously tons of laughter. And then he goes on to tell more humor about, you know, when my son was 4 in England. Well, actually, he was 4 everywhere, to be honest. In fact, everywhere we went, he was 4. So he just like a stand-up comedian, like Bob Newhart, he just hits us over and over again. And some of his little stories don't even have any relevance to his point, but they're just so doggone funny. Then he goes on to tell a story about how his son was in the Nativity play, and he got the role of Joseph, and how they were so thrilled. He was like the star of the show, Joseph, even though he had no lines. And so he just makes fun at this, and he just has such a fun time at it. And he goes on to tell this story about how, you know, the 3 boys were supposed to be the 3 kings, what is it? Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And when the 3 boys came out, it was their time to say the line, we bring you gold and frankincense and myrrh. And the 3 boys were kind of nervous, and they actually their order got screwed up. So they said, the first boy says, I bring you gold. And the second boy says, I bring you myrrh. And the third boy said, Frank sent this. And again, uproarious laughter. And his point, now is his point. So you tell a story, make a point. So the point he made was that, you know, children are creative. If they don't know the answer, they're not afraid to just wing it. They just go out on a limb. They're like, well, Frank sent this. The kid got messed up. You know, he got turned around. He didn't know, so he just winged it. And that little girl, well, she just winged it. She wasn't afraid to go out on a lesson. She didn't know that she wasn't supposed to know what God looked like. So really, really just think about how powerful that is. So tell the story, make a point. And if you're one of our members and you've taken the courses about speaking, you'll know never make a point without a story, never tell a story without a point. So, and then one of the things I love is he does like formulaically what I love to teach is he ties a bow around it with a quote. And he said, Picasso once said, he said that all children are born artists. The problem is to remain an artist as we grow up. I believe this passionately, that we don't grow into creativity, we grow out of it, or whether we get educated out of it. So why is this? Powerful, boom. So he ties a bow around that with the Pablo Picasso. Then he goes on to make us laugh even more and more about how he made this transition from England to Los Angeles and how shocking that was. And then he goes on to tell the story that it's kind of pointless, but it's really, really funny. And that's why this whole talk worked. He says, actually, he lived in a place called Snitterfield, just outside Stratford, which is where Shakespeare's father was born. And you struck by a new thought. I was, you don't think Shakespeare having a father, do you? Because you don't think of Shakespeare being a child, do you? Well, Shakespeare being 7, I never thought of it. I mean, he was 7 at some point. He was in somebody's English class, wasn't he? And uproarious laughter. He says, how annoying would that be? You know, they says, oh, Shakespeare, I must try harder. Then he's being sent to bed by his dad saying, go to bed now, William, and put that pencil down and stop speaking like that. It's confusing everybody. So he just goes on and on with the humor. And he goes on to just tell really, really funny stories. And you just gotta watch the whole talk. But then he talks about how why we structure education the way we do it, the math and the sciences at the kind of most important, and with some of the arts kind of towards the bottom. They're always the ones that get the funding cut, right? The physical education, you know, things to do with our bodies, things to do with the arts, they get cut. And he goes on to explain why. His assertion is it's the Industrial Revolution needed people who knew how to do stuff with the arts and with the sciences and math, and that we needed those skills. And so we trained workers to do that. And he said, well, things have changed now. You know, this isn't the Industrial Revolution anymore. And now what we're doing is outdated, and it's not really going to work for the people who are going to retire in 2056. And he goes on to tell this he talks about, you know, we're basically training everyone to be a university professor. And he said, and he is one, or he was one. And he said, well, university professors live in their head. And he said, basically their body is just a way to get their heads to the various meetings they have to go to, that with a total disregard for fitness, for the things that our bodies need besides just you kind of being a transport for our brains. And goes on to tell some amazing stories. And he goes on to tell another very, very touching story about a woman who ended up being a dancer, like a world-renowned dancer, and how when she was a child, she was diagnosed with basically attention deficit. And they took her to a doctor, said something must be wrong with her. All she does is jump around and dance around. And how basically they went from doctor to doctor to doctor, and they were getting ready to put her on meds. And one doctor he met with the kid and her mother, and sent the mother out, talked to the kid, and then left and had the mother look in at what was happening when they left the room. Their daughter was dancing around. And he said, there's nothing wrong with your daughter. Your daughter's just a dancer. And, you know, some other doctor may have medicated her and, you know, never really encouraged her to do what her passion was. So just really touching stories about children. He goes on to talk about the history of education and how it's not really working anymore. And then just really wraps it up with a call to action that's, you know, that basically says, this is our job. Our job is to give these kids that future. We need to take a whole relook at our education system, and we need to move creativity to the top. And we need to recognize that every child has their brilliance. Every child has their genius, and stop marginalizing the kids who don't fit into our idea of this industrial what the industrial revolution required. He said it's ludicrous. So that's our job. And he has taken this up as his mission now. And so he does a lot around the world to revolutionize education and make sure that we are really encouraging creativity in our schools. So absolutely fantastic talk. You have to watch it. You'll laugh your full head off. So, but the reason this really works is his use of humor. His timing is impeccable. He tells incredible stories about the children, really heartfelt, wonderful, touching stories. And he follows that paradigm of get attention, what's the problem, tell the story, make a point, tell more stories, make a point, have a call to action. It's formulaic, and he follows it beautifully. And so what works is though is the humor and the way he walks us through, and he's just so eloquent in how he does this, and he's just so doggone funny. He keeps our attention the whole way, even though some of the stories don't have anything to do with this point, and they're totally irrelevant. They're funny as heck. So there are about 15 different things that I look at when I look at one of these talks, and I did this rating for Simon Sinek. I got a little flack back from people saying, who are you to criticize Simon Sinek? Well, it's not criticism. This is just my opinion. Okay. So these are just, I rate on a scale from 1 to 5, 5 being the best, 1 being the lowest, various elements of a talk. And so for this particular talk, for Sir Ken Robinson, for his opening, I gave him a 4. He kind of came out a little bit, didn't really jump and get our attention, but very quickly he got us with that zinger about, okay, in fact, I'm leaving. And so I gave him a 4 out of 5 for his opening. Just, he languished a little bit with the, hey, how you doing? In terms of getting to the problem, I thought he got right to the problem, made some very, very bold, incredible, powerful statements about what the problem is and what he believes. He made a strong assertion. So I give him 5 out of 5 for the problem statement. In terms of stories, I give him 5 out of 5. His stories are just incredible. Watch the video. You'll laugh your butt off. In terms of his call to action, I thought his call to action was a little bit on the weak side. I gave him 3 out of 5. I thought he could have been more prescriptive of here's how to get involved. But he did have a call to action at the end. He said, this is our responsibility to change this. For humor, I give him 5. Obviously, it's one of the funniest gosh darn things you'll ever watch from a university professor. And in terms of engagement, I think the humor, I gave him 2 out of 5 for engaging. But if you take the humor out, he didn't do a lot of things to really engage us, engage me. Not a lot with visuals, not a lot with body language, not a whole lot with intonation. But his humor, see, I kind of excluded the humor in that. So I gave him 2 out of 5. One of the important things is to challenge beliefs. And so he challenged my belief about education, what I believe is important in education. I'm an engineer. I have my PhD in electrical engineering. So obviously math and science are a strong belief for me. So he did a great job of challenging my beliefs about what is important. In terms of a personal story, he told a lot of stories, but the closest he came is telling a story about his son. And his son, it was almost kind of irrelevant. It was kind of more a point of humor than anything. So he didn't really draw us in and get us to know him. So I gave him 2 out of 5 for a personal story. Personal story creates engagement with the speaker. That's why it's on my list. In terms of body language, he used hand gestures. He didn't do anything distracting. He said ums a few times. So I gave him 3 out of 5 for body language. For voice tone, I gave him a 4. He does a great job with his voice. His voice goes up and down. That's part of his timing in the things that he says that are humorous. And in terms of visual aids, I gave him a 3 out of 5. He didn't really have any, but it didn't hurt. Okay, now it didn't work to enhance his talk, but it didn't hurt anything. So I gave him a 3 out of 5. Well, I hope you found this useful. I really would encourage you, go watch this talk if you haven't already, and then watch this video of kind of me walking through the talk. I think it will help you to understand some things about your own speaking and why this talk really works, and maybe some of the things that he could have done to make it even better, bring it to A+ up to, you know, who am I to say a talk that has over 52 million views could be better? But, you know, there are some things technically from an analysis standpoint that he could have done more effectively. All right, well, this is Don McGrath. I hope you enjoy this. I hope you got something out of this, and I hope this really helps you to think at a deeper level about talks that you watch and your own speaking. All right, this is Don. Take care, Stage Warriors. Peace out.